there, listeners. Are you feeling the weight of the world? Well, you're not alone. The U.S. Surgeon General says nearly 50% of parents are overwhelmed by stress. And guess what? It's affecting us all. Just last year, we heard about an epidemic of loneliness hitting half our population, especially young adults. But there's hope. I'm Scarlett Lewis, founder of the Choose Love movement. We're dedicated to your safety, health, and well-being with proactive mental health strategies. Imagine a life where stress and loneliness are replaced by joy and connection. We've already reached millions with essential life skills to prevent violence, substance abuse, and mental illness. Want to join this life-changing movement? It's easy. Visit chooselovemovement.org today. Become a member, spread the word, and access our free resources. Together, we can create a loving, supportive community. Remember, all the nurturing, healing love you give comes back to you tenfold. Thank you for choosing love.
I choose love. I choose love.
Welcome to the Choose Love podcast, where we explore how choosing love, which is, the formula courage, gratitude, forgiveness, and compassion in action, can transform our lives, our schools, and our world. Today, I'm honored to welcome Dr. Nina Cerfolio, a distinguished psychiatrist, psychoanalyst, researcher, and humanitarian. Dr. Cerfolio has written extensively on the psychological roots of violence, including school shootings, and is recognized for her deep work on trauma, healing, and resilience. Her groundbreaking research offers vital insights into how untreated suffering, alienation, and disconnection can manifest in violent behavior. And more importantly, how empathy, community, and social emotional growth can help us prevent tragedy and build peace. She's not only studied violence from a clinical and academic lens, but has also dedicated her life to helping people transform their pain into purpose. Sound familiar? Her work resonates deeply with our mission at the Choose Love movement, and I am so grateful to have her join us today. Sorry, I have a fly in the studio. How are you?
Seeing floaters.
You always want to be a fly on the wall. Well, this guy literally, it wants to be a fly on my forehead.
We need more flies on the wall.
That's right. Exactly. Especially with this conversation. This is an important one.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. And I'm just so honored to be with you. You're such an inspiration to me and millions of other people.
I appreciate that very much. My first question is probably the question on everybody's mind. And that is, what draws you to study the psychology of violence and specifically school shooters?
Wow. So that's a loaded question. So
I know.
Yes, I grew up to begin with, in my childhood, I grew up in a violent family. It was a good family. My father was a physician, but there was a lot of punishment and like hitting and slapping. So I think to make a long story short, I was always interested in and I've always reached out, even as a child, to people that are marginalized and bullied. Like when I was 16 and got my driver's license, I remember driving around and trying to reach out to people that were homeless and ask what I could do. And I remember in high school, there was a girl that was overweight and bullied who came up to me and said, I have something to show you. And I was late for class, but there was an urgency in her voice. And I just knew I had to go into the ladies' room so we went into the girls' room. She pulled out her father's pistol, which was loaded. And, I was an angry kid. I was an angry kid because it was, I grew up in an abusive family. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, I hate to say it because I love my parents dearly, but you have to call a spade, which is why I think
people can resonate with that are listening,
Okay, thank you. And I think that she knew I was angry. And I think if I had spurred her on, she, looking back as a psychiatrist, I think that she was hypomanic. I think she was bipolar. Her brother that was in my class, sadly, he was always responding to internal stimuli. He was seeing things and hearing things that weren't there. it was the age of LSD and drugs, but he did not do drugs. And I remember I always tried to reach out to him to talk to him because he was so alienated and isolated from the other students and seemed like everyone.
Sounds like schizophrenia.
Yeah, he had early, looking back as a psychiatrist. I mean, I don't think I knew that then as a 16-year-old, but I knew he was psychotic. I knew something was desperately wrong and it wasn't from drugs. Yeah, he had early onset schizophrenia. And despite it being a private school that we went to, having resources, their family was a very waspy family. It was a wealthy family. It was a very cold, non-emotional family. This boy never got help. And to this day, like I feel so guilty that I didn't bring him to the ER to get help, because I know now that is what you have to do. And that is what I do with my patients who are, floridly psychotic. It is a medical emergency. It's no different than having a heart attack and needing medical treatment.
Mm-hmm.
It's an absolute, he wasn't suicidal or homicidal. He was just psychotic, but it needed to be addressed and treated.
Mm-hmm.
And the earlier you treat with medications, the better the outcome of the schizophrenia, the illness, and the less, generally speaking, medication is needed, and the more the psychosis and delusions will stop. So that's
And that's interesting that you say that, because, and I'll just add, you're talking about voices in the head. Every school shooter I've ever spoken to has said that there were voices in their head. And interestingly enough, they also take responsibility. They say, I'm not saying this because I'm saying it's the voices that made me do it, but it's voices in their head that drove them to do what they did. In other words, like TJ Stevens, who held his administration hostage in the 80s. He wrote a book about it, and he was on our book club. And he said the night before he was going to attempt suicide. And then, of course, sometimes suicidal ideation becomes homicidal ideation. He said that night he was going to attempt suicide, and there was a voice in his head that said, if you want peace, then you kill, maim, and destroy. And he said those three words went through his head just over and over and over until it drove him that following morning to go back to his school. And he's not excusing his behavior or what he did. He ended up not shooting anybody, but he did go to prison for several years, and now he has reformed himself. But it's so interesting that every single shooter that I speak to says that.
Absolutely. So what you said is so key. So I did a research study with other psychiatrists at Stanford, and Ira Glick is a schizophrenia expert. And so generally speaking, with mass shooting and terrorism research, and now also with the Trump administration cutting all the resources to even collect data on it, it's hard to get funding to do studies. So we did it on our own, even though I'm a psychiatrist in private practice and I teach residents at Mount Sinai. But we did this research on our own pretty much because I was interested in further understanding the psychology of mass shooters.
And when did you do this research? Just
so
curious.
we did it, and it was published in I believe 2022, and it's also in my book. So we got awards for this research, and the research on mass shooting and terrorism is skewed because it's mostly done by applied psychologists or criminologists. I was a consultant for a Harvard study with two brilliant psychologists, but they had medical students using the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, to make psychiatric diagnoses in these perpetrators, which medical students don't have the nuance or the ability to really make psychiatric diagnoses. So, but
and not only that, but the DSMV, you diagnose based on symptom clusters, not on blood tests or anything else. So for me, I don't know that diagnoses are always accurate either.
That's true. No, it's a valid point, because two different board certified psychiatrists can come up with different diagnoses, but having run the psychiatric ER, it doesn't matter if you're diagnosing schizophrenia or bipolar, generally if someone's psychotic, they're going to get antipsychotics.
Mm-hmm.
So like the treatment to me is what's important,
Okay.
not the label. But we found in our psychiatric team that 87.5% of the mass shooters that we studied, which was from the Mother Jones database, had severe axis 1, which is like schizophrenia disorder. And we found that the majority of school shooters had autism. They were misdiagnosed. They had early onset schizophrenia, but were misdiagnosed with autism or with ADHD or with OCD. And I think a good example of that is the Sandy Hook shooter, who, in looking at his history, so he was, just briefly to describe him, he was, I feel, misdiagnosed with, I think he was called Asperger's and autism and OCD. He really
and anorexia.
Anorexia, to the point where he had brain damage. Like they said he had brain damage from anorexia, and he had a very pathological incestuous relationship with his mother, who was she was a hypochondriac apparently. And they he came from a broken home, and that it was just, the mother seemed to alienate both of them. She took him out of school, she took him out of treatment. But
When you
I
say
think
both of them, you mean she and her son?
yeah. So she kept on pulling him out of various schools, and and so I just want to say that he was a typical perpetrator in so many ways, because I think he was misdiagnosed, mistreated. Dr. Langman, who's a psychologist, also writes about that he felt that he also met the criteria for chronic paranoid schizophrenia. He had these paranoid delusions that he wrote about, that adults were trying to, in some way, do bad things to children, which I think was an association to his relationship with his mother, although it was paranoid and somewhat psychotic, delusional. He covered the windows of his bathroom because he was paranoid in some way. He wasn't interpersonally related. He had downward drift, even though he was very smart. He apparently, I think he went to college for a year at 16. And this is all very typical of these mass shooters, which they have higher IQs than doctors, judges, and most of the mass shooters that I studied are smarter. They have higher IQs than me, and they can often hide their psychosis because often their families have a family history of schizophrenia, but they suppress it. And
Did Adam Lanza's family have a history of
I
schizophrenia?
that I don't know. That I don't think so.
Yeah,
As
I
far
didn't
as
hear
I
about that
know,
either.
yeah. But in many others, like the oh gosh, they tend to all blur together for me. But there have been lots of kids
Because
that
there've been so many. You
I
can't keep track of the
you can't.
individual ones.
Yes,
Dr. Cerfolio, I'm just scared. I'm just kidding. Yeah. So interesting. But then I look at, and what I did was look at Adam's childhood, knowing that, obviously that person was in pain. Were they mentally ill? Yes. But what facilitated that mental illness? What cultivated that? And I look at his childhood, where he went to the same school where he perpetrated the crime.
yes,
He attended those very classrooms. That's why he knew how to shoot his way through the glass doors and make a left down the first grade hallway looking for soft targets. And in the final report, often he was found in the cafeteria, shaking, crying, with anxiety, alone, or
yes,
with the janitor helping him.
yes.
I know his mom brought him to school and he was tested for special services. He needed 7 and he was only provided with 2. The ones that the school had to provide, those were for academics. That was the inability to touch paper and a speech impediment. And then the other 5 were social and emotional, and schools don't have to don't have to cover those unless the student is failing. And so they don't. And so he right away started with a deficit that his mother saw, that his mother, brought him into school, asked for help, was not given the help that she asked for. And so, it's kind of set up immediately as, you say he was pulled out of school, but she saw that he wasn't getting what he needed from school. There was actually bullying that happened, even though, interestingly enough, the report came back saying no sign of bullying. I think that, there's a little bit of self-protection there in the results, because in reality, I had students that went to school with Adam who reported that he was bullied on all levels from administration down. So, and they personally witnessed it. So, you can say, and I see a mom doing the best that she can. I know that a lot of people that are listening today are, struggling with their children and are doing the best that they can. And they're not feeling like they're getting the support that they need, the caring, concern, and kindness, the doing the right thing for our kids. It's sometimes a lot about budget. And then, of course, after a school shooting, it becomes about liability. And I think there needs to be a shift towards children's safety, health, and well-being first. Aside from, forget everything. And I think if we had that, I just think that we've lost our way a little bit in our priorities.
I absolutely agree with everything you said. I didn't mean it as a judgment,
Oh no, I didn't think you were. I was just saying, I'm coming to this, having heard so much condemnation about Adam's mom, and of course she made mistakes and she died for those mistakes, but I think more, we have to, I personally, I look towards how do we reduce and prevent the suffering that led to those events. I mean, a lot of times, I guess it is the schizophrenia that's that actually, I guess, has resulted, which is very interesting, in the misdiagnosis of autism, ADHD, OCD. That's really interesting.
And they also don't get the right medication with those diagnoses. Like even if they were misdiagnosed and got antipsychotics, they would get better. But they didn't. They were misdiagnosed and mistreated. Usually they weren't even diagnosed, but if they were treated, it often was misdiagnosed and mistreated.
I think that's really important. I mean,
oh my God, it's key. You have children who are hearing voices, like you said, telling them to kill. In many instances, the Oxford high school shooter told his mom and dad, he said, I need to see a psychiatrist. They laughed at him and mocked him.
Right.
The principal brought them into school and said, your child is suicidal. He needs immediate psychiatric intervention. They refused to bring him in to get help. And then the day of the shooting, apparently 4 days after the father bought him a gun for Christmas, the day of the shooting, he scribbled, blood everywhere. The thoughts won't stop. Help, help, help. And there was a drawing of the pistol the father bought him. He was drawn out of class and they called in the parents. Parents didn't bother to see the gun was missing. It was in his backpack. The principal said, again, you need to get your child immediate psychiatric treatment. In my mind, the school should have walked Adam with the parents to an ER.
Oh, that's Ethan, right? Ethan with the parents. But, and here's the problem with everything that's going on, the way that we handle school shootings now. We learn after the fact by
Yes.
mistakes. And
Yes.
we've been doing that the whole time.
Over and over
And over. And there are always mistakes that are made in every
absolutely.
single one. And so it's, you know, we look back and now we know, and that's, and by the way, it's less of a protocol than everybody listening would think. You know, the learning is not being spread around. It's as inefficient
Yes.
as our learning is by mistake.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, so my and what I've been saying also, and I do want to note, by the way, Dr. Cerfolio, that those parents are in jail, and they're going to be in
Yes.
jail for a long time, and
Yes.
they should be in jail because
Absolutely.
our children are our responsibility, and
Yes.
they were out partying, and they
Yes.
didn't care. And that poor
Right.
little boy was actually, I do say poor little boy, although he,
Yes.
you know, is a mass murderer. And
Yes.
I apologize for saying that on one hand, but on the other hand, like, there was a little boy that was, you know, banging on his neighbor's doors, begging for food.
Yes.
And this is what happens
He was
in
15.
society when we don't, you
Right.
know, when we're not looking around, being present and addressing pain. That pain comes back to bite us.
Yes, his next door neighbor wrote an article saying, I knew my next door neighbor would be a mass shooter. She offered to babysit for free and babysat Ethan and her son, who was around the same age. She even took Ethan on vacation one time with her family because he was so isolated and alienated by the parents. And it's just so tragic to me because he didn't get the care and the help that he needed. And the parents are still in denial. They're trying to overthrow the verdict. And even when Ethan was preparing his defense, the parents again wouldn't help him. I mean, just so abusive and neglect. Like,
wouldn't it be incredible if we raised human beings, because it is in our raising, it's in our morals, it's in our character, to say, I take responsibility. I made a mistake. I want to make sure that other people don't make the same mistake. Would it be incredible? I mean, I saw some of that at Sandy Hook too, with everybody rushing around to, you know, to rid themselves of liability and not take responsibility. And it's like, come on, everybody, please. I say, after my son was murdered, I take my part of the responsibility for what happened in my community to my child in his school. But we all have to stand up and do that. Like, I think that we still think, oh, there's, you know, there's going to be a law. There's going to be somebody that comes in and saves us from ourselves. And I'm here to say, the Calvary's not coming. This is this is going to be from inside out. You know, everyone listening and myself, come on, people, wake up. And you know, we're failing our children. We're failing to keep them safe. We're the ones responsible.
Yes.
So, you know, as much as you want to blame and finger point and fault find one party or the other, you know, at the same time, we're all failing. So
we're all failing and we're all responsible. And that's why I love your message with the social emotional learning. Instead of putting drones in our school or school resource officers, which are basically police officers that are armed, or metal detectors, if we could have social emotional learning, reaching out to the child that is abused, that is neglected, that is marginalized, that is suffering.
Yeah. And by the way, it doesn't have to be one or the other. I am not saying don't do metal detectors or drones, or I love SROs. You know, they're our biggest proponents, by the way, of Choose Love, because they value proactive prevention. They know what it looks like when you don't do it in the aftermath. So, you know, I'm not saying don't do any of those. I'm saying, in my opinion, I'd love to hear yours, the number one most overlooked aspect of school safety is teaching the kids social emotional competence, how to have healthy relationships and connection, how to choose love, how to love themselves, how to grow through pain. All of these things that the Choose Love movement does. In fact, we're the only program focused on love and post-traumatic growth. And I think so important, you have to have both. I've been saying, oh, a quarter of the resources towards proactive prevention, the grievance end of the pathway to violence. Now I'm just going to get bold and say what I've been thinking. at least half. It's got to be both. And parents listening, you got to make sure your schools are doing it. Schools, you need to step it up. It's not a box that you check off. It is the box. It's not a piece of the pie, as they say. It is the pie. It's not only for the children, it's for the educators, it's for the parents. We all have to be in this together.
I totally agree with you. And I do write about it a lot, that social emotional learning is so key to provide to our kids. So many kids grow up in abusive homes where they're neglected and then alienated and bullied. And then on top of that, they have psychosis and mental illness. And to me, the worst form of child abuse, if you can even empathize with someone that's hearing voices telling them to kill chronically for many years. You know, some kids blowing up explosives in their backyard to stop the voices, which was one mass shooter, and the parents threatening to send them to military school and suppressing a family history of schizophrenia and not getting their child immediate psychiatric care is the worst type of torture I can imagine.
I mean, it says, I don't care. You know, even I know Adam Lanza, the Sandy Hook school shooter, he asked for help. When he was in 5th grade, he wrote a book, hand wrote, and made copies and brought it to school. He was going to sell it, but the teachers took it. And just put yourself in his shoes for one moment. He writes a book and he decorates the cover. It's called The Book of Granny. And in this book, a witch comes, he's in 5th grade at Sandy Hook Elementary School. A witch comes to the school with a broomstick. This broomstick opens into a semi-automatic weapon and she murders children.
Right.
So what is he saying? This is in my head.
Yeah.
And no one addressed him.
Right.
No one said anything.
That's the delusion right there. That is a paranoid delusion, which is sort of like an association, just because I'm a psychoanalyst, from how he feels persecuted or alienated, not misunderstood, neglected. Not, this is a cry
And he
for help.
was all those things.
I'm sorry.
I mean, you say he feels all those things, and I'm
Yes.
just validating he
Yes.
was all those things.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
he didn't know how to deal with that.
Right.
It's not like, you know, people get bullied in school, people get neglected, people fall through the cracks, and then they go on to be superstars.
Right.
Or it destroys them.
Right.
And
Right.
they go out and destroy others.
Right.
And
It's either or. It's a double.
in my mind, right, it's a double-edged, but
Yeah.
in my mind, the difference is the ability to be able to take that pain and grow from it.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, when you have so many multiple issues, thrown in one little child, like I do think he was delusional, like, that he wasn't being given the proper treatment. And then on top of all of that, he's bullied and he's marginalized and he's alienated and he's super bright, he's super intelligent. It's too much for a kid to deal with. Like that's way too much for any person, but a kid whose brain is developing. It's almost impossible not to eventually listen. We call them command auditory hallucinations. It's voices telling you that you have to kill. And
But I would just say that I think that, and this is why I've dedicated my life to choose love and to being part of the solution. I would say, and I picture little Adam, and this is what I said at Jesse's funeral. I picture little Adam as a little boy having an angry thought without the skills, tools, or nurturing environment to manage that thought. That thought grew into, and more painful events and neglect grew into the Sandy Hook tragedy. And the amazing thing to me,
yes,
the thought could be changed, and it could have been changed anywhere along the way.
Absolutely.
So I asked everybody to start thinking about what you think about, change one angry thought into a loving thought that will ripple out. And it's like, I just believe in this with every cell in my being, and I've dedicated my life to it, that had he had a program like Choose Love, had he been aware of all of these internal resources that we have, the ability to change that anger, the ability that the understanding that pain has a purpose. It's there to help you grow. And then some skills and tools to help him do that. I believe that if his classmates and his educators had had more awareness and school essential life skills in their tool belt, that they would have been kinder, that they would have had courage to address his needs, that they would have actively listened to what he was saying when he cried out to them, and the tragedy would never have happened.
Right. That you said those words at your son's funeral is just like so profoundly touching, and so what is more needed in our world, which is love and compassion, understanding, but it's really so moving. And it
wasn't my idea, by the way. I can't take credit for it. Jesse wrote it on our kitchen chalk.
I know. I read that.
I'm just, it changed the way that I looked at everything. And I'm like, wow, okay. So at the very foundation of this, and I know for you, because your focus is and I want to get into what are the signs and everything, but like you're looking at diagnoses and all of that. That's not my wheelhouse, and I'm not an expert in that, and you are, and it's fascinating to talk to you about that. And I feel like I diagnose people all the time, but I'm sure it's wrong. But anyway, I feel like addressing the root cause, raising strong moral, but beyond that, and I know parents are going, wait a minute, I do that at home. You do it at home, but not everybody does it at home. And your kids are going to school with the kids that don't get it at home. And those are the kids that you want to have it. So, if school's the only place that they can get it, your kids are just getting reinforced and they're practicing it and they're getting stronger with it. But these kids are learning it for the first time and they're growing, and you want them to, because if they don't and they grow up angry, that turns to hate, that turns to revenge, that spikes that addiction network, and then they come back. They're gonna seek revenge in the form of violence, and so this is so good for everyone.
I choose love.
Hey there, listeners. Are you feeling the weight of the world? Well, you're not alone. The U.S. Surgeon General says nearly 50% of parents are overwhelmed by stress. And guess what? It's affecting us all. Just last year, we heard about an epidemic of loneliness hitting half our population, especially young adults. But there's hope. I'm Scarlett Lewis, founder of the Choose Love movement. We're dedicated to your safety, health, and well-being with proactive mental health strategies. Imagine a life where stress and loneliness are replaced by joy and connection. We've already reached millions with essential life skills to prevent violence, substance abuse, and mental illness. Want to join this life-changing movement? It's easy. Visit chooselovemovement.org today. Become a member, spread the word, and access our free resources. Together, we can create a loving, supportive community. Remember, all the nurturing, healing love you give comes back to you tenfold. Thank you for choosing love.
I choose love. I choose love.
Yeah, no, I say the exact same thing to you, which is, it's how these kids are treated, and they feel hopeless and helpless and miserable, and they don't see any outs. So they want other people to feel how miserable, hopeless they feel. And that is the root cause of it. Because even with mental illness, it's an association. So it's not a reason often why they're doing what they're doing, but it's an association to it, as is like alienation, bullying, abuse, neglect, not getting proper treatment. So and then there's often a personal crisis. Like what was so touching to me with Adam was that, in reading about his history, it seemed the only time that he was happy, it was at Sandy Hook. And the rest of the time he was really struggling with mental illness and wasn't really well related.
And I just want to challenge that for a minute, because I know that whoever the school shooting expert was that came in, that was you know, he told all the parents that in a closed setting, and many parents got up and walked out because, you know, the truth of the matter was he wasn't happy at Sandy Hook. I mean, he may have had happy moments.
Yeah, that's what I
There's a
meant.
lot of torture that
Right.
happened, and I don't believe, as this school safety expert said, that's the reason that he went back to Sandy
No,
Hook.
no, 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 no.
Yeah, I mean,
I
but I'm
just,
just saying, like, that's why I'm like moving towards lived experience experts, because, you know, the conclusion that that person made, I think, did not make common sense. I mean, he suffered at Sandy Hook, and there are examples of
oh,
that.
he suffered. No, no, no. He suffered throughout. It sounds like he suffered throughout his entire
Yeah,
life.
yeah.
But I'm just saying, comparatively, it seemed like that at Sandy Hook, he was a little bit more related and less miserable. I mean, given it's always in context, he was always suffering and miserable and like the typical profile of these perpetrators, unfortunately. And I
Yeah,
do.
so let me ask you something. So you've got a little boy, and you know they're out there now, in elementary school, who is bullied, who is riddled with anxiety, who does not have a great home life, or you know, you know, there are other extenuating circumstances, let's just say that, and you know it. What do you do? What do you do? Because I know, like, the school will say, well, we can only do so much. Even if it gets to the point of, you know, threats, the police are also hindered. I've heard this over and over as things happen in schools, and they call me and ask for my advice. And so what do we do?
So I have a patient who's a teacher, and she teaches at I think it's the second largest high school, public high school in the United States. And she called me urgently. She never calls me urgently. So I took her call, and she had, she teaches in this high school, and she has a lot of illegal immigrants. And this boy had come from Guatemala without his parents, and he was threatening to bring a gun. So his brother was in a gang. They had access to guns, and he was threatening to shoot the school up. The only reason why he was coming to school was for food. He wasn't properly clothed or fed. And all the teachers knew about him, but everyone wasn't, like, they all wanted to stick their head in the sand except for my patient, who's a really compassionate teacher. And I told her that, you know, you or the principal or the administrator, when he next comes in, if he's threatening to shoot up the school, you have to physically bring him to the closest ER to be evaluated by a psychiatrist. And, you know,
Were the police not involved? I mean, if he's making a
they
threat about this,
no, I don't know. Again, like, you know, they don't know what to do, right? Like
and it's true. And you know what? I think that's interesting that you say that, because you assume schools across the country, they have the
No.
protocol now. They don't.
They don't.
Some
The
do.
school didn't know
Some
what
do.
the school didn't know what to do.
Right.
So I told her and to form an allegiance with him, to be, like, you know, super kind to him, to reach out to him. She sat him in the front of the class, right in front of her desk. She sat him next to really good, kind, compassionate students. She would often, like, give him extra food. And eventually he was, you know, brought, I think, by the administrator, and maybe it was the social worker, to get psychiatrically evaluated. And I guess the situation just diffused itself, and he stopped coming to school. But I have to
Well, I
ask.
mean, now he's out there, you know what I mean?
I know.
And now he's somebody else's problem. Maybe he comes back to the school. They
Yeah,
do.
he very easily could, because this was
Yeah.
last year. So,
That's what you don't want to have happen, I would think.
right. I mean, this kid needed help.
Yeah.
This kid is here. I think he was 15. He had no parents. He had no support. His brother was in a gang.
Oh, man.
He was struggling just with, you know, eating and surviving. So, but she actually diffused my patient by just reaching out and being kind to him. That stopped his threats of shooting up the school. Just
that's a beautiful thing to know.
just her love and her compassion and her kindness. Like she wasn't afraid of him. She's not a, you know, she had broken up kids fighting before, and
Yeah.
she's not afraid. She wasn't afraid of him.
That's courageous. And
Yes.
the rest were, you know, they don't know what to do, and
Right.
so they don't do anything, but we're
Right.
responsible for our actions and our inactions. I
Absolutely.
think that's really interesting. I had a superintendent, somebody that I really respect, just this incredible human being, call me out of a conference, and they said, so we have a young man here, you know, making threats and doing inappropriate Google searches. And so, you know, some teachers want him out of the school. I don't think that's a good idea. What do you think? And I'm like, why are you calling me? You know, like why are you calling me? First of all, I said, I'd call 911.
Right.
And he said, we did. And, you know, that is, you know, like they can't do anything. And I was pretty shocked. Eventually they did, they handled it, but you know, it made me realize, you know, and I thought, like, I think a lot of people think, and I just assume stuff, right? That we've had so many school shootings. We have 2 school shootings a week in our country. So they're not the new norm. They are
Right.
our norm. And you think that, you know, and there's all these school safety conferences going on, and all
They
this
don't.
focus and all these billions of dollars funneled to the attack end of the pathway to violence to harden schools. You just assume like every school knows what to do in situations, but these situations are coming up and they're new, and new issues, and really it's like they really, some of them struggle. And so, you know, do you want to talk about the signs, because you've written extensively
Sure.
about that, and
Sure.
you have a lot of our audience are teachers, they are parents, and they want to be, you know, informed, and they want to do the right thing. They want to obviously keep their students and kids safe. So what advice can you give us?
Yes. So I just want to say, I think it depends on the state laws, whether if you report a threat, whether that's a crime. So that like that the number one way that school
You're
shootings
right.
have been averted is through peer reporting, because the kids always know who the school shooter is, right? They always know. They always, like the Parkland shooter, he fled with other students. The kids knew who it was. It's us, the adults, who are like oblivious. That
I
don't.
just want to add with that one, you know, that's Nicholas Cruz.
Yes.
And not only that, but there were 3 unanswered calls to the FBI tip line,
Yes.
where they literally had messages on
Yes.
their machine saying, there's a kid that's threatening to do a Columbine style shooting. You
Yes.
need to help. The FBI were aware of Nicholas Cruz. They went out to
Absolutely.
visit him many times,
Yes.
and those went unanswered. And there was
And
huge award given to those parents because of that. And I
yes.
just think that, you know, we need to start listening. We need to
Yes.
start responding. We
Yes.
need to start being present, because this is what's a clear and present danger.
Yes.
That is, you know, like,
Ignored.
believe somebody when they say they're going to do something.
Yeah.
Believe them. And literally, I believe all behavior is a cry for love.
Yes.
And as that a teacher that you counseled, you know, did, all
Yes.
behavior is a cry for love.
Yes.
All negative behavior,
No.
everything's a cry for love. We all
Not
love
only
love.
did the FBI fail the Parkland shooter, but
Yeah.
he was also referred to behavioral health. They had memos on him. They knew that he was homicidal and suicidal,
Oh, he
and
was really struggling, and
everyone
by the way,
failed.
he'd been kicked out of school.
Right.
So there's another thing. It's like,
Right.
that is not a solution to kick
No.
a child
That-
out of school, because guess what? They can come back. And they might come back. And, you know,
And
again,
it
so
only
great.
furthers their sense of alienation and revenge. So
That's
to
exactly
me,
right.
if you want to create
And worthlessness.
and worthlessness and hopelessness, and that they don't measure, and impotency, that they're not, that they don't exactly. So, you know, expelling them from school, which so many of the perpetrators, school shooters that I studied were, that's like, you're giving them a script to become a school shooter. Like that is not the answer. It's just further neglect, marginalization, sticking, like that doesn't make the problem go away. It's not.
It's the easy thing to do, but it is
Yes.
not the right thing to do.
Right. Right.
And even, Aaron Stark says,
Yes.
and I love, it resonated so deeply with me at the end of our podcast that we did together. I said, Aaron, sometimes I get so overwhelmed by the systems and processes that have to change in order for us to get ahead of this problem. He said to me, Scarlett, that's wrong. It has nothing to do with systems and processes. It has everything to do with giving love to
Yes.
those we feel deserve it the least because
Yes.
they need it the most.
Yes.
I will never forget when he said
Yes.
that to me. I repeat it all the time because it's right there and
Yes.
it's simple. Simple
Yes.
isn't always easy though.
Yes.
And these are the kids that are falling through the cracks, that hate themselves,
Yes.
that can't have relationships with other people. It's because if you hate yourself, it's almost impossible to show love for others. In fact, it's almost impossible to receive love
Right.
from others. That's another lesson that I learned from Aaron Stark, that if anybody showed him kindness, he was going to make them realize that they were making a mistake, that he
Yes.
was worthless, and he was going to not stop until they realized and they left too,
Yes.
which everyone did.
With abused and neglected children, they're emotionally starved. So when you try to emotionally feed love a child that's abused and neglected, they don't feel they deserve it. They don't know how to let it in. They're going to push it away. Like really, and I did a similar thing. I would push kindness away. And, I grew up, my father was a doctor. I mean, I wasn't homeless like Aaron Stark and where no one was on his side. And I would like to think with my patient that she showed this Guatemalan boy that someone cared and that someone actually was loving him and feeding him and attending to him. And that in it of itself, that in it of itself is what made him not be homicidal and angry and vengeful. I mean, I can't even imagine what it's like to be an illegal immigrant, not speak the language, have no support, be starving. This is a kid that needs love, needs support, needs help, like you're saying. But
yeah, so important. Yes. So,
it's key. No, it's key to all of this. To me, it's key.
Yeah. Yeah. And Aaron Stark said the same thing. It was an
Yes.
act of kindness. That's what he says, that turned him around from
Yes.
not carrying out his plan to shoot up his school's cafeteria. It was a simple act of kindness. His friend invited him in to watch a movie and he realized, wow, this is what people do. He was homeless, living in his
Horrible.
shed.
No
But
one cared about him. I wrote a Psychology Today piece on him, calling a sandwich and a shower stopped a school shooting, mass shooting, because he was also thinking about going in, I think, to a store department. But yeah, no, I love his story, and he also is so smart. He's got a really high IQ, and I've spoken with him, and I write about him a lot. But if you want me to talk just briefly about the 10 warning signs of a school
please,
shooter,
that would be great.
Okay, the first is that there's often they're smarter than most of us. They're quiet. They're not in a relationship. Often they don't have like a girlfriend well, it's usually boys, and they're
They
unmoored.
just come out of a relationship.
Or-
I know, with
Yes,
the mass
or they feel rejected and they're devastated because their relationship was pretty much like everything to them. And then a lot of them are bullied and marginalized. And I have people yell at me online who are whatever there. So I have to say that most people who are bullied and marginalized don't become violent. But having studied school shooters, mass shooters, the majority of them are bullied, marginalized, isolated, alienated. A lot of them are homeless. Yeah.
Why do people yell at you online? I mean, obviously, somebody that is well connected, has healthy relationships, feels good about themselves, regardless of what happened in their past, is not going to want to harm themselves. If they love themselves, feel worthy, not going to want to harm themselves or other people, right? I mean,
Yeah,
so
ironically, it was the football coach of my high school who like started bullying me online for saying that. And he was also
that's ironic.
he was a biology teacher. And I'm thinking, yeah, he's the type of guy that would have, and I saw it in high school, bullied, marginalized kids. Like got
Yeah.
this poor boy that I, looking back, was schizophrenic. Whatever, he was responding to internal stimuli, to he was hearing things and seeing things that weren't there. And probably this guy thought, like, I'm not going to intervene, I'm not going to help, I don't, this, the kid was like alienated. No teacher reached out to that boy. Like, I reached out to him as best as I could as his classmate, but I should have brought him to an ER to get help, and I didn't. And it breaks my heart to this day that I didn't do that.
But you know what? Here's the thing. You didn't know that then. You were doing the best you could with the skills and tools you have. I'm just giving you what you give your patients probably. And it drove you to do what you're doing now to help so many more. So it's a hard lesson. It's lessons
Yeah.
that we learn from mistakes
Yeah.
that spur us on to become better. I mean, I wish that I knew more about school safety. I wish that I had encouraged Sandy Hook to have, they actually had a social emotional learning program, but it never got out of the box. I wish that I had known that. I wish I'd been more involved. I wish I had helped them do what they needed to do, but I didn't know. I know now, and I've dedicated my life to it. So I hear in you what I sometimes do to myself, and then I go, stop.
Yes.
Because that's not productive, and I
It's
want to be
not.
productive. And our conversation right now is like so amazing. I'm really appreciating it. I hope everybody listening is too. And we're going to get your contact information so that anybody that has questions can contact you. But go ahead with the signs.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I just want to say I really identify with not that I'm violent, but identify with these kids because I felt like them, growing up.
You know what? A lot of us can identify with anger,
Yes.
with revenge. And any of you saying, well, I can't identify with anger or revenge. Well, you need to come to the table of common sense and truth, because we all feel those things, all of us.
They're human feelings.
Yeah, they're human feelings. And it's what we know now about revenge is that it stimulates it's the same neurocircuitry as addiction. And so
Absolutely.
that's why kids wind up there. And so we know this stuff. Now we just have to make sure that others do, which is part of the reason for this podcast.
Yes.
And that we're implementing and doing the best that we can for our kids that are in pain.
Yes. So most of these kids, as we've talked about, I think at length, are abused and neglected. But again, because this teacher of mine kind of like took me to task, which is, I'm not saying that most people who are abused and neglected in childhood become violent, but nonetheless, most of the perpetrators that I studied, I would say like the majority were abused, neglected. And then a key one to me is parental minimalization and or denial of the child's mental illness or family history of mental illness. So like in many of the cases I studied, there was a family history of schizophrenia. I think the parents felt judged or like they were defective. And I want to say mental illness is no different than any other medical illness. It's biological, it's genetic, and everyone suffers from sadness, anxiety, and it's not an incrimination to have a mental illness. It just needs to be treated medically like any other medical illness. And
I think that's where we gaslight our kids and the public by saying, let's get rid of the stigma, but only 1 in 5 have mental illness. And are you one of the 5? It's like, no, everyone feels all the range of feelings. In fact, there's research called emodiversity that says that the more emotions you feel and the more varied, the more mentally healthy you are. We
Yes.
all have those feelings. And it's like, when a kid has anxiety, it should be told to them, this is information for
Yes.
you. Maybe give them some awareness that it's the same physiological thing as excitement, and that it's all in the mind, and that they can change their thoughts. But I think that you know,
And that there's help, that there's
Yeah.
actual help for
Yeah.
people like me, and that everyone is going to feel hopeless and helpless and
at some point.
suffer and feel pain in their life. Everyone, that's human. And if you don't feel it, it's odd, I
Right.
would say. So yeah,
And at the low points, they come back up.
absolutely.
The
And
high
kids,
points, you come back down.
right. And kids don't understand that. They think that their feelings or predicament is permanent. Like they don't have,
And only theirs. And they're
right,
the only one feeling that pain.
right. They don't have the tools and the skills that adults do. Their brains are still developing. So we need to like teach parents and kids that these aren't permanent states and they can get help.
Thank you. And thank you for all of your work. And I know we're doing an interview. I look forward to that. And then
Yes.
we'll schedule a part 2.
Okay.
Everyone, listen to this and please pay it forward. The most powerful way to spread a message is by word of mouth and by referral. That's how Choose Love programs have spread to 18,000 schools and counting in 132 countries. So
Wow.
it's by word of mouth and referral. So please forward this to anybody that you think would be interested. Let them know about our no cost essential life skills curriculum. It is revolutionary. It's unique. It's not like anything else out there on the market. And I'm always available to answer any questions. I appreciate you so much, Dr. Cerfolio.
Yeah, I want to add that I'm also available to anyone that's struggling or
Oh, that's amazing.
yeah, anyone that's willing to talk to me that's thinking about violence or suicide or any perpetrator. I would love to talk to anyone or victims, people that have been traumatized. I'm available.
That's amazing. That's an amazing offer. And we will put your contact information in the show notes. And until next time, thank you so much, everybody, for listening and for choosing love as a thoughtful response. I know it's not always easy, but it's the way that we are our highest and best version of ourselves. And that definitely ripples out to create the world that we want to live in, one that is safe and kind. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and I'll see you soon.
Hey, hey, oh. It's all part of us. We can all choose love. It'll lift you up if you let